Well.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I also rise to make a short contribution in this third reading debate. And let me start by saying that it is a pleasing thing to see this legislation finally pass into law. It's had a rather more than necessarily protracted gestation period. I do want to make a couple of process points though, sir, notwithstanding the substantive support for the legislation that members on this side of the House are expressing. First of all, there cannot be justification for dealing with these sort of matters in urgency. They are minor, they've been languishing on the order paper for a long time. They simply ought to have been dealt with in ordinary parliamentary time, and if this House continues to rush these sort of measures through under urgency, then we'll continue, I'm afraid, to undermine public confidence in our legislative process. And that's something that I think all members should reflect on. The second issue that I wanted to deal with by way of a bit of criticism was the way in which the matter was dealt with in committee stages. Sir, I took the time in the committee stages to rehearse the three concerns that had been pointed out to the Commerce Committee by the Regulations Review Committee, which I have the privilege to chair. First of all, there was a commencement issue. Secondly, there was an issue around whether or not a clause to be inserted in the hazardous substances legislation was satisfactory, given that it differed to the existing clause but did something relatively similar, and there was no explanation about that. Thirdly, there was an issue around incorporation by reference, an important issue about the public being able to know what the law is. Now, on the first two issues, I think there was a satisfactory resolution. On the commencement issue, the Commerce Committee clearly listened to the concerns and dealt with them. On the second issue, the discrepancy in procedures issue, although there wasn't an express explanation by the Commerce Committee, one of the ministers who took the chair, Mr Matt, sought to explain the matter. Mr Hyde did, on the advice of officials, seek to explain that further, but there was really no attempt by the minister and the chair to address the third issue, the issue of whether or not the extensive changes to the incorporation by reference procedures were actually satisfactory. And given the minister's expressed passion for good law and appropriate regulation, I would have hoped he'd have respected the parliamentary process a little more than simply declining to take a call on that issue and make an explanation of whether he thought the changes were adequate. So, sir, this is legislation which is supported by the Labour Party. It is legislation which owes a lot to the efforts of my friend, colleague and benchmate Leanne Dalzell, and I'll join the chorus of praise and support for her, since that's obviously become traditional in this debate. And I could go further, as Ruth Dyson suggests, but canonisation is not within the power of the House according to the standing orders, so we better just leave it where things sit. But, sir, I do, although expressing support for the legislation, expressing a degree of pleasure that this appears to be likely to become an annual exercise, because it is a good thing to do from the point of view of efficiency and good law. It is disappointing to have to express the sadness that I have that we're dealing with the matter under urgency on a completely unmerited basis, and that we didn't really get the sort of respectful and careful consideration of the issues that the rhetoric of this minister would lead us to believe we should have had in committee stages.
Kevin Haig.
Yes,